It's this pretty significant shift happening in architecture. Moving beyond just how buildings look and getting really seriously focused on the people who use them.
Yeah, it's really about time.
Right.
Like, we spent so long talking about, the architect's vision or, just making things look pretty or just the pure practicalities.
Yeah.
But UCD, that's user-centered design,
Yeah.
is like, wait a minute, what about the people?
Yeah, exactly.
The actual humans?
It's kind of wild that it's taken us this long
I know.
to get to this point, to really, really center people in the conversation about buildings.
Yeah.
And UCD is really taking all of that into consideration.
It's asking,
Mm.
who are you? What do you need?
And not just like physical needs, but cultural backgrounds, different abilities, like all of that.
All the stuff that makes you, you.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to unpack today, right? It's this deep dive into understanding people and how that can result in better, more inclusive, more responsive buildings and spaces. But first, let's just start with what is this thing? What is UCD?
User-centered design, right. So at its core, it's a way of doing design that keeps the users front and center.
Yeah.
The whole time. So, you've got your needs, what you want, even your limitations. And those are the things that drive every decision.
So it's not like the architect saying, this is my art and you're going to live in it.
Yeah, it's not about, imposing a vision or anything.
Right.
It's about starting with you
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out how to make the space work for you.
Okay, so what are some of the guiding principles of UCD?
Well, first and foremost, you got to have empathy. And this isn't just like, oh, I get that you need a place to sleep or whatever.
Right.
It's about really getting into your head.
Mm-hmm.
Like what makes you comfortable?
Yeah.
What makes you feel safe?
Mm-hmm.
What makes you feel anxious? That kind of thing.
Because you can't design a good space if you don't even understand how people experience it.
Exactly. And then there's participation.
Okay.
So it's not just the architect doing their thing and then, showing it to you at the end.
Right.
It's about involving you in the process.
Okay.
Like from the beginning.
Okay.
Doing interviews, having workshops,
Yeah.
getting your feedback all along the way. So it's a collaboration.
Okay, so it's a back and forth.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And then there's contextual awareness.
Contextual awareness. Okay.
So it's understanding that your needs are shaped by a whole bunch of things, like your cultural background,
Yeah.
the climate,
Right.
even the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So what works in one place might not work in another.
Totally.
And then there's functionality and accessibility,
Okay.
which is about making sure the space actually works.
Right.
For everyone. So like wheelchair access, clear signage.
So that everyone can actually use the building.
Yeah, exactly. No matter who you are or what your abilities are.
Right, right.
And then you have iteration and feedback, which kind of goes back to the participation thing.
Okay.
So it's about designing something, getting your feedback, making changes.
Right, so it's not just like, here's the plan, take it or leave it.
No, it's a process.
Yeah.
You try things out, you see what works,
Right.
and then you refine it. And then finally, there's personalization,
Okay.
which is about understanding that everyone's different.
Right.
So a good design should be flexible enough to adapt to different needs.
Okay.
Maybe it's adjustable workstations or like flexible layouts in a home. So it's really taking all the different pieces into account.
So it sounds like UCD is almost like this whole philosophy.
It is. It's a way of thinking about design.
Yeah.
And it's drawing on all this really cool stuff like psychology and behavioral science and all these different fields.
It's interesting, though, because it feels very modern, this whole UCD thing. But the idea of designing for people, that can't be new.
No, not at all. I mean, if you think about it, people have been building things for other people for centuries.
Right, right.
And, back then, they didn't have fancy terms like user-centered design.
Yeah.
But they still understood that buildings had to work for the people who use them. I mean, think about like ancient temples.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Or like community gathering spaces.
Mm-hmm.
These things were designed to meet very specific needs.
And they were probably pretty good at it, too.
They were, because they had to be.
Right.
They couldn't just slap something together and call it a day.
Right, right.
People's lives depended on it. And then you have like Vitruvius, this Roman architect back in the 1st century DC.
Wow.
And he said that good architecture had to have 3 things: durability, utility, and beauty.
Okay.
And that utility part, that's all about the user, making sure the building is actually useful for the people who are going to be in it.
So even way back then, they were thinking about the user.
They were.
Mm.
And then during the Renaissance, you had this focus on human scale and proportion.
Okay.
So like making buildings that felt good to be in.
Yeah.
That took into account how people move through space.
Okay.
And how light affects their experience. So there was definitely a sense of considering the human element.
So this idea has been brewing for a while.
Yeah. It just took a while for it to really crystallize.
Okay. So what about the more modern era, like the 20th century and all that?
Well, the modernist movement was big on this idea of form follows function.
Right.
Which basically means that the shape of a building should be determined by what it's used for.
And that kind of inherently involves the user, right?
Right, because you have to think about who's going to be using it and how they're going to be using it.
Yeah.
So architects like Le Corbusier and Walter Gropius, they were all about designing for modern life.
Okay, so they were thinking about the user, but I feel like their approach was a little different from what we see today.
Yeah, I mean, they were still kind of working with this idea of the ideal user.
Okay.
Like there's this one way that people live, and we're going to design for that.
So not as much focus on individual differences or like diversity.
Right. It was more like, this is the best way to live,
Yeah.
and we're going to make buildings that support that. But then you get into the postmodern period,
Oh,
and things start to shift.
how so?
Well, you have architects like Christopher Alexander,
Okay.
and he wrote this book called A Pattern Language that really emphasized this idea of designing for human needs and patterns.
Okay.
And then you have John Haberkin, who is all about giving people more control over their own living spaces.
Okay.
So this was a big shift from the top-down approach of the modernists.
So it was more about empowering people.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
that really laid the groundwork for what we see today with UCD.
So this is all super interesting, but I'm curious about how this actually works in practice. Like if you're working on a project, how do you go about implementing UCD?
So there are a few key phases that we usually go through:
Okay.
research, participation, testing, and iteration. And these phases, they're not always linear.
Okay.
They often overlap and inform each other.
Gotcha. So let's start with research. What does that look like in a UCD project?
So the research phase is all about understanding the users
Okay.
and their needs.
Right.
And it involves a lot of different methods, like doing interviews and surveys.
Okay. So you actually talk to the people who are going to be using the building.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking to people, observing them,
Oh, we can.
seeing how they use their current spaces.
That's interesting. So like you might go and watch how people use their kitchens.
Exactly, because people don't always realize how they actually use a space.
Right. We all think we do.
Right. So observation is really key.
Okay, cool.
And then we also develop personas.
Personas.
Yeah, they're like these fictional characters,
Okay.
but they're based on real data that we collect.
Gotcha.
So they help us to keep the specific needs of different user groups in mind.
Okay. So you might have a persona for like a busy parent or a student or something.
Exactly. And then there's empathy mapping.
Empathy mapping.
It's a way of visually mapping out what users say, think, do, and feel in relation to a particular space or design challenge.
Okay. And this helps you to really put yourselves in the user's shoes.
Yeah, it's all about trying to see things from their perspective.
Okay, cool. So that's the research phase. What about participation? How do you actually get people involved in the design process?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to do that. One is through workshops and co-design sessions.
Okay.
So we get a bunch of users together, along with the architects and designers,
Okay.
and we brainstorm ideas together.
Oh, cool.
And sometimes we even do some, like, rough sketching or model building.
Wow. So it's a really collaborative process.
Yeah, it's all about getting everyone's input. And then for bigger projects like public buildings or parks, we often hold community engagement forums.
Okay.
So anyone from the community can come and share their thoughts and ideas.
Hmm.
And then we have charrettes.
Sure.
They're kind of like these intense design sprints
Okay.
where we get everyone together in a room for a couple of days.
Wow.
And we just hammer out a bunch of design solutions.
That sounds intense.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's also really productive.
Oh, okay. So after all this research and participation and brainstorming, what happens next?
Then we move into the testing and iteration phase.
Okay.
So this is where we start to create prototypes and mock-ups of the design.
Okay. So you might build like a little model of the building.
Yeah, we might do that. Or we might use VR.
Oh, cool. Like virtual reality.
Yeah.
So people could actually like walk through the building virtually.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
It's a great way to get feedback on the design before we actually start building.
Okay, so you get feedback and then you make changes.
Right. And then we test again. And we keep doing that until we have a design that everyone's happy with.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess this doesn't just end when the building is finished, right?
No, not at all. We also do post-occupancy evaluation.
Okay, what's that?
So once the building is built and people are using it,
Mhm.
we go back and we see how it's actually working.
Okay.
We do surveys, we talk to people, we observe how they're using the space.
And this helps you to learn for future projects.
Exactly. It's all about continuous improvement.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned universal and inclusive design earlier. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so universal and inclusive design are all about making sure that spaces are usable by as many people as possible,
Okay,
regardless of their age or ability.
you're right.
So it's things like ramps, tactile wayfinding, clear signage,
Okay.
sensory-friendly spaces, just things that make the space more welcoming and accessible to everyone.
Okay, so it's not just about designing for the average person.
No, it's about designing for everyone. And it's something that we consider from the very beginning of the design process.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about the general principles of UCD. Can you give me some specific examples of how this is being applied in different types of buildings?
Sure. So in healthcare, for example,
Mm-hmm.
UCD is being used to create hospitals and clinics that are less stressful and more healing,
Okay.
like Maggie Centers in the UK.
Okay.
They're these beautiful spaces that are designed to be really calming and supportive for cancer patients.
So it's not just about the medical treatment, it's about the whole experience.
Right. And in education, UCD is being used to create more flexible and engaging learning environments,
Okay.
like the Arrested Gymnasium in Denmark.
Okay.
It's got all these different learning zones and seating options so students can learn in the way that works best for them.
Oh, that's cool. So it's tailored to different learning styles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in residential architecture, UCD is being used to create homes that are more responsive to people's needs and lifestyles.
Okay.
Like the Quinta Monroy housing project in Chile.
Okay.
The architects gave residents the basic structure of a home and then let them customize it to fit their needs and their budgets.
Oh, wow. So they had a say in how their homes were designed.
Yeah, and it was really successful. It created a much stronger sense of community.
That's amazing. And what about public spaces?
Yeah, so in public spaces, UCD is all about making sure that everyone feels welcome and safe,
Okay.
and that the space is easy to navigate and use.
Okay.
A good example of this is the High Line in New York City.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's this elevated park that was built on an old railway line, and they got a ton of input from the community during the design process.
Okay.
So it's a really popular space because it reflects the needs of the people who use it.
That's great. So it sounds like UCD has the potential to really improve our built environment. But are there any challenges or drawbacks to this approach?
Yeah, there are definitely some challenges. One is that it can be time-consuming and expensive to do all this research and participation and iteration.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And sometimes clients aren't willing to invest the time and money.
I can see that.
And then another challenge is that it can be hard to balance the needs of all the different stakeholders.
Okay, so you might have different groups of people who want different things.
Exactly. Like in a hospital, you have patients, staff, visitors. They all have different needs.
Right.
And it can be tricky to design a space that works for everyone.
Yeah, that sounds tough.
And then there's the risk of getting too focused on what people want right now
Okay.
and not thinking enough about the future.
Right, because what people need and want might change over time.
Exactly. And we don't want to design buildings that are obsolete in a few years.
Right, right. And I guess there's also the risk of people just kind of paying lip service to UCD.
Yeah, there's definitely a danger of that. You know, some architects might say they're doing UCD, but they're not really putting in the effort.
Right.
So it's important to be critical and make sure that people are actually following through on the principles.
Yeah. Okay, good point. So it's not a perfect system?
No, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction.
I agree. It's definitely a more thoughtful and inclusive approach to architecture. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about how technology is changing the way we do UCD.
Oh, yeah. Technology's having a huge impact.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, one of the biggest things is VR, virtual reality.
Okay, yeah.
So we can actually create virtual models of buildings,
Okay.
and people can walk through them and experience them as if they were really there.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's really cool. And it allows us to get feedback on the design much earlier in the process.
Okay, so you can make changes before you even start building.
Exactly. And then there's BIM, building information modeling,
Okay.
which is a way of creating a really detailed digital model of a building.
Okay.
And it allows us to simulate how people will use the building.
Oh, wow.
So like we could see how people will move through the space
Okay.
or how the lighting will affect them.
Okay.
And we could even use it to test different accessibility features.
So you can see if the building is actually going to be usable for everyone.
Right. And then there are all these new sensors and data analytics tools
Okay.
that we can use to track how people are actually using buildings.
Okay, so you can see like which rooms are being used the most.
Yeah. Or like how the temperature is affecting people's comfort levels.
Okay, wow.
So technology is giving us a lot of new ways to understand the user experience and improve our designs.
It's amazing how technology can really enhance this whole process.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's only going to get more sophisticated in the future.
Okay, so looking ahead, what are some of the biggest trends and challenges that you see for UCD in the coming years?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is going to be designing for a changing world.
Okay.
You know, with things like climate change and an aging population,
Right.
our needs are going to be different in the future.
Right. Our homes and our cities are going to have to adapt.
Exactly. So we need to be thinking about how to design buildings that are flexible and resilient.
Okay.
And then there's this whole discussion about the relationship between human-centered design and planet-centered design.
Okay, so we need to consider the environmental impact as well.
Yeah, we can't just design for people anymore. We have to design for the planet, too.
You're right. We have to find a balance.
Exactly. And then some people are talking about moving away from the term user altogether.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, because it kind of implies this passive role, like people are just consumers of space.
Okay.
But really, we're all active participants in shaping our environment.
Right. We all have a role to play.
So some people are suggesting that we start using the term citizen instead.
Okay. I like that. It's more empowering.
It is. It's about recognizing that we all have a responsibility to create a better world.
That's a great way to put it. So I think we've covered a lot of ground today. What are some key takeaways about UCD that you hope our listeners will remember?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that UCD is a fundamentally different way of approaching architecture.
Okay.
It's not just about aesthetics or function. It's about people.
Yeah.
It's about understanding their needs, their desires, their experiences.
Right. And designing spaces that really work for them.
Exactly. And I think it's a really important approach, especially as we face all these challenges in the world today.
I agree. It's a more humane and thoughtful way to design.
Yeah. And it has the potential to make our lives better in so many ways.
Okay, that's a great note to end on.
It's been fun.
It has. And to our listeners, I hope this is giving you a lot to think about. As you go about your day, take a look around at the spaces you're in. Were they designed with you in mind?
Yeah, good question.
How do they make you feel? And what might be different if those spaces were designed using UCD principles? It's something to ponder.
It is.
Thanks for listening.